with the bar lined with the boys and bums, rotting their bodies and jeopardizing their immortal souls.
We understand there are questions and concerns about this.
No, are you still smoking pot?
I'm not actually. I had to stop.
Why?
I was addicted to it.
You stopped smoking weed?
I stopped smoking because, to sit here and to talk about what I'm doing, I want to be really clear.
I think some people have more tolerance, for smoking pot than others.
And what about you?
I don't smoke.
Okay.
I don't enjoy it. I don't understand. I don't know how people function on it.
We've come an awfully long way from days of prohibition. Now navigating new waters as Canada joins Uruguay as the second country in the world to legalize recreational marijuana. Of course, deep down, we all know what's not good for our bodies, and still our vices seem to control us. Today on Context, how are Canada's faith communities reacting to cannabis culture? How will we educate our youth to deal with another mind-altering substance?
I'm Lorna Dueck.
I'm Sheldon Neal.
And I'm Molly Thomas.
And this is Context. What does the research on pot use reveal? The director of Canada's only dedicated cannabis research centre busts the myths and gives us truth. Dr. James Mackillop.
And how are religious groups responding to legalized marijuana? Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, and Catholic leaders weigh in.
If we're going to look in the Bible for just the chapter and verse where it says, do not smoke marijuana, we're going to look in vain to find it. On the other hand,
searching for answers on whether weed is right or wrong, an Oregon pastor and former pot smoker wades through the debate.
It gives them and the way that it
And a Colorado Christian active in the cannabis industry tells us why he thinks it's okay for Christians to smoke pot.
We feel that controlling it, regulating it, treating it more like alcohol will make it more difficult for underage folks to access marijuana. While at the same time,
that's our Prime Minister there believing legalizing pot will help protect our children. We thought we should check in on that with Canada's only dedicated cannabis research centre. Dr. James Mackillop is the director of the Boris Centre for Addictions Research and director of the DeGroote Centre for Medicinal Cannabis Research at McMaster University. And Dr. James Mackillop, thank you. You've been very busy talking to many of us in the media. Let's just address the Prime Minister's comment. This is about protecting our children. Will legalization of marijuana do that?
That's certainly the goal, and it's front and center in Bill C-45. The big question is, will it actually happen? And the devil will be in the details. It'll be in the implementation, and the big question is, will a regulated system actually increase accountability and create environments where it's less likely for cannabis to wind up in the hands of kids?
And so that's what everybody is going to be watching, working towards. Let's now work on some myths, busting some myths, really pinning some facts down. Let's talk about marijuana is worse than alcohol, or alcohol is worse than marijuana. What's the fact?
That's a great question. So a lot of people will say, well, it's no worse than alcohol. And certainly I understand that perspective, but it's really important to realize that alcohol also has a wide variety of risks. So alcohol is implicated in a lot of motor vehicle accidents. It's associated with assault, with homicide, with suicide over time. Heavy alcohol use or alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, leads to cardiovascular disease, liver disease. So being no worse than alcohol is not really a high bar necessarily. Alcohol has its own set of harms.
Okay, next myth, it's not addictive. Marijuana is not addictive.
That's a myth I really don't like, because the reality is we know that cannabis is addictive. Cannabis use disorder is the technical term for addiction to cannabis. It doesn't happen to most people who use cannabis, but it does happen to a proportion. About 7% of Canadians over their lifetime will meet criteria for cannabis addiction. And that's not a small number if you think about the large number of people who actually use cannabis.
Okay, let's talk about who's most at risk.
Well, in the general population, with legalization, I actually don't think that there will be dramatic differences, although of course we're going to study that to see whether there are big changes. But there are certain parts of the population that are particularly vulnerable. And for example, young adults to me are a very high-risk group. We know that typically people first try cannabis during young adulthood, as teenagers or in their early 20s. And during that same period, the brain is still developing, and it's not fully developed in terms of the frontal lobes until the mid-20s.
Okay, so would you say as a parent I should do prohibition until mid-20s?
As a parent, I think that your work's cut out for you. And I don't have black and white answers so much as, and I'm a parent myself, I think that the important thing is to engage with your kid and to have the conversation about cannabis early and often to find out what they know and hopefully provide them with the best information possible.
Okay, other side of the spectrum, seniors.
Yes.
What's the risk for seniors on cannabis?
Well, interestingly, seniors are showing the largest proportionate increase in cannabis use, in part because there's a lot of interest in using it to treat a lot of conditions that are often associated with being an older adult. There are a lot of risks because one of the risks of cannabis is motor impairment or coordination impairment, and seniors are already at risk for falls. So we recognize that that could be a further issue. There also can be drug interactions, and most of the time people think about drug interactions between prescribed medications, but cannabis also interacts with other prescriptions, and seniors are often taking more than one prescribed medication too.
And your medicinal research is really showing a lot of big cautions and red flags about the medicinal use.
I wouldn't call them red flags. What we know is that there has been a skyrocketing increase in the number of Canadians who have sought out cannabis for medical purposes. But there hasn't been a skyrocketing increase in the evidence for its utility for a lot of the conditions that people are using it for. So our perspective is we really need to have an evidence-based perspective of medical cannabis. We need more data to show which conditions it really helps compared to a placebo and which conditions it may not be helpful with. And that's what we're really trying to promote at the DeGroote Centre.
Okay, so medical needs aside, how do people cope with the anxiety, just the need to check out that's causing them to want to just enjoy a marijuana toke?
Sure. Well, I think that we're not anti-cannabis, we're not pro-cannabis. In terms of the DeGroote Centre, we're pro-evidence. And in general, we're not asking people to necessarily abstain from every substance that's available from a recreational standpoint. But we are really mindful of the fact that there are risks. There are risks in terms of acute intoxication, whether it be from cannabis or from alcohol. And there are risks over time in terms of long-term use. So we really want to make sure that people are aware of the risks when they do choose to engage in recreational use.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mackillop. Really great insights into the legalization of marijuana and what we should be watching out for. Thank you for reminding us that it is addictive and that there's lots of question marks. So we've got more on this at our website, more coming up in the show, but first over to Sheldon and Molly now for the millennial point of view on pot.
Cannabis, marijuana, weed, pot, no matter what you want to call it, what does recreational legalization mean for our society? You know, Molly, when I talk to my friends, a lot of them, they're kind of really wrestling this out. I mean, they're on the fence. What are you hearing on your side?
Honestly, most of my friends have been smoking pot casually for years. That's the truth. And they view it kind of the same as alcohol. Don't drive while you're smoking. Don't go to work high. But they're very, I would say, responsible, contributing members, educated members of society. You know, it's really been around since my teens. That's not even a new phenomenon. But it's interesting with the federal government because they say that they're putting this regulation in place to take care of young people, to make sure that it's out of the hands of young people. So you can't access this specifically, right, until you're 19 in most provinces, 21 in Quebec. And so that's kind of their go around. But the editor of the Canadian Medical Association Journal has said, you know, brains develop all the way to 25. Wow. And so it's not actually safe to have it out there. But in my view, and the people around me, it doesn't matter if it's legal or not. They've been doing it for years.
Wow. And you know, Molly, there are so much to really unpack with this. Here's some fast facts from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Marijuana smoke contains carcinogenic combustion products. And I really don't want to get into a lot of the medical terms. Don't want to lose any viewers. But about, in some cases, 50% ranging, Molly, to 75% more hard carcinogenic.
Yeah, I find it interesting because you have added carcinogens, but then you still have no specific link to lung cancer.
Right.
So there's two sides of the coin there. there. Other critics of marijuana legislation have been pretty tough on who gets the money here, who profits here, Sheldon. You got to talk to a marijuana user about that?
That's exactly right. I went to Toronto last week, Molly, and spoke with a medical marijuana user, Tim Malvey, whose main concern about this whole thing is how much of a tax grab this is for the government and big business, and is concerned over the independents that are in jeopardy of being, really swallowed up by government and big business. Very interesting chat. Take a look at this.
It is pretty much wild, wild west, especially with the corporate cannabis and the stock exchange taking it on and everything like that. As far as the business aspect, it's definitely changed the landscape in the past little bit, for sure. Now more people are cashing in on it, and I don't see much of a difference. Being downtown Toronto, you see it everywhere, you smell it everywhere. I would like to see the big cannabis companies or just the government try to address the small business aspect to it and try not to leave them out, as they're the ones who fought for the culture and create the community in which everybody's now cashing in on.
Those viewers are weighing in on this today. I had a chance to put out on my Twitter this morning, what are your thoughts, concerns, or hopes regarding this legalization? Here's a little bit of what some of you had to say. Jason Powell coming out saying, I've smelled the pot smoke already for the last few years. Now they will actually be policing it. As long as people take it as serious as driving while drunk, then everything will be okay. Wow. Here's Cam Parisian making a little bit of a joke with this. He put up a photo with a hazy shot saying 8 hours into cannabis legalization in Canada, and this is what you get.
Wow.
Gabbard, you're funny.
And on a personal, when I think of this too, Molly, I feel this is something that humanity is going to have to really evolve with. We're still government officials, there's legal ends. They're still trying to make sense of this all. And we as people, I think, is going to be something that we're going to have to really take on a case-by-case basis to make sense of it all. In my heart, though, talking to a lot of youth, young adults, speaking, especially from a faith-based perspective, that's where a lot of the war is at times. And I think at the end of the day, whether you decide to puff or not, inhale or not, you have to ask yourself at the core, is this the best way I can take care of my body? And I think that's a good starting point for us to have a greater discussion.
Absolutely.
I think everything will be all right.
The thing I find the most difficult is it just stinks everywhere. I don't like the smell.
As far as making it legal, I think it's about time.
If you look at it in Holland, it's officially not legal, but it's like endorsed, it's like allowed.
Still ahead, recreational marijuana. The sky most certainly will not fall, but how are religious communities dealing with legalization?
And according to one Christian academic, pot smoking is like drinking a glass of wine. Do you agree? Stay with us. I'm Molly Thomas in the Cox's Bazar region of Bangladesh. Context and World Vision Canada teaming up again to bring you stories about one of the worst humanitarian disasters on the planet. Where is God in the world's largest refugee camp? Do Christianity and cannabis mix? Joining me now is Todd Knupp, Vice President of the University of Cannabis Technology in Pueblo, Colorado, and a devout Christian. Nice to see you, Todd.
Hi, how are you, Molly? It's great to be with you today.
Todd, you're a little bit of an oxymoron for a lot of our viewers. You're a Christian and a pot smoker. How do those two mix for you?
Actually, fairly well. It's remarkable the level of misunderstanding about cannabis. I don't hold the same view as many traditional Christians, but I do have a basis for my beliefs. I begin at the beginning, Genesis 1:12. God created the vegetation, the trees, and the flowering plants with seeds, all of their kind, and God looked at his creation and saw it was good. Beyond the good, I didn't see anything after the period that said, except cannabis. God kind of blew it there. All of God's creation is good. That's what I believe. That's what the Bible says.
But Todd, is there a difference? Is there a difference between having something in the earth and consuming it and becoming high and your mind being taken over?
Well, sobriety is an interesting topic because there's quite a wide range of effects with cannabis. Many cannabis plants don't have a heavy psychoactive effect. Many are quite medicinal in their nature, and it generally doesn't tend to debilitate one. I oftentimes smoke when I'm in the process of doing creative work.
Do you feel shamed by your fellow Christians in terms of the views that you hold? Because most people that I speak to from religious communities stand on the other side.
They do. And, frankly, this is a great point, Molly. We, as Christians, oftentimes do something we're admonished not to do, which is judge. The good book says, judge not lest ye be judged. And yet Judgments abound when it comes to cannabis. It never fails to amaze me. We don't demonize the opium poppy, and yet look at all the opioid deaths that are occurring all through the United States and all over the world. We don't consider that a bad plant, probably because it saved countless millions of people from suffering untold pain. It's only in our misuse of God's creation that we have a problem. And cannabis, if used correctly, heals people, relaxes people, and serves a variety of functions that really don't take one's attention away from God.
Todd, fascinating point of view. Appreciate having you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
That was Todd Knupp, Vice President at the University of Cannabis Technology. Not every Christian is on the same page when it comes to recreational marijuana. Jeff Lacine smoked pot as a teenager and now is a pastor at Selwoods Baptist Church in Portland, Oregon, where recreational marijuana has been legal since 2015. Nice to see you, Jeff.
It's good to be with you.
Okay, Jeff, talk to me about why you decided to stop smoking pot.
Yeah, well, the short answer is that Jesus took hold of my life and he gave me different priorities. So now my priorities are to experience the goodness and glory of God, the reality of God as he intended me to. So the end game for me as a Christian is to be resurrected in a new body and to experience the reality of God, not a distorted reality.
So Jeff, a lot of Christians will listen to that and say, hey, I don't see smoking pot any different than having a glass of wine at the end of my day. What would you say to those people out there?
Yeah, so there clearly is a permissible, God-glorifying use of wine according to Scripture. The Bible goes out of its way to actually point out the place of wine that can be permissible and good, but it can also be bad. So, there's warnings about wine and being drunk with wine and having our reality so distorted that wine doesn't serve us in our lives, but it actually works against us in experiencing reality. And the question that I would pose to those who are wanting to use marijuana recreationally, so not under the supervision of a doctor, but are using it to have fun or to escape in some way, is this enhancing reality and getting you closer, especially to Christians, to experiencing the reality of God as you are intended to.
Jeff, there's so many questions around health in Canada. Have you personally seen any residual effects of smoking pot at this stage in your life?
As someone that has sought out escape through chemical means and has developed bad habits of discipline in dealing with stress, I have to ongoing fight those bad habits that I developed in my younger years. But as far as residual effects, like mentally, emotionally, I wouldn't be able to, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, point any direct causation or correlation between those things.
Jeff, I want to quickly ask 20 seconds about the dispensary that's across the street from your church. I mean, how do you, as a church leader, as a person of your community, I guess, interact with people that think very differently than you?
Yeah, we interact with them like we would interact with anyone else, as people created in the image of God for his glory that don't always have God's thoughts or God's mind about what is good or what is right or what is wrong. And so, but we would interact with them as just a fellow human being created in God's image.
Jeff, great to talk with you today.
Yeah, great. Thank you for your time.
That was Jeff Lacine, pastor at Selwood Baptist Church. He joined us via Skype from Portland, Oregon. Still ahead, how are major religions reacting to the legalization of marijuana? We sit down with leaders from the Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, and Catholic faiths to find out.
So how are religious communities set to deal with this change in our culture? Around the table with me are Pandit Roopnath Sharma from the Ram Mandir Temple, Rabbi Stephen Wise from the Shari Beth El Congregation, and Dr. Moira McQueen, Executive Director of the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute, are joining us here at the table. But by Skype, Dr. Hamid Slimi, Imam and founder of the Faith Life Network. Thank you all for being with us on an important day. We've already decided a month or 2 or 3 from now is when we're going to talk next, but let's start with each of our faith traditions. Dr. McQueen, let's start with you. What does the Catholic faith advise about marijuana consumption?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. There's not an official position on this because it's so new and because everything has been illegal. But the Canadian bishops are really taking it very seriously, and they've already sent out a generic letter talking about the risks. And I think, as with most of us in the Catholic community, we're really more concerned about children than anything else, and the sheer availability of marijuana. And as well as availability, I think the idea that something is legalized has always meant in some communities that if it's legal, it's morally acceptable, and we don't really believe that. Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi Weiss, the Jewish faith on marijuana consumption.
Well, we have 2 points of view. The first is a concept called dina machuta dina, which means that the law of the land is the law for our community. So now that it's legal, as of today, it's legal within the Jewish community. But as you pointed out, is it the right thing to do? Is it the ethical point of view? And we also have a concept that's called l'chaim. You might have heard that phrase when people take a glass, drink l'chaim to life.
To life.
So, you know, we have alcohol, we have other of those kinds of things where we celebrate life, right? So it's l'chaim, to life. But we don't want to use something to get away from life. That would be mechaim, from life. So if you're doing it responsibly and you're doing it in the to life, to celebration, to love, to family, to success, then there are opportunities to participate in using marijuana to life, l'chaim.
Well, okay, we're going to challenge you about that in a moment, but Pandit, the Hindu community, what would their view be on consumption of marijuana?
There's no official consensus on this subject, but across the board, anything that intoxicates the mind and takes it away from its pure state is not advisable. Society, across the board, Hinduism is very particular that we relate to nature and we must harmonize with nature. Nature is here to serve us, not to make us lesser than we are. And from that point of view, there's a lot of debate that will be going on for a long time as to the pros and cons.
Okay, so Dr. Salimi joining us by Skype, the Muslim view on consumption of cannabis.
The Muslim view is actually probably known. As you know, alcohol, wine is not allowed to consume in Islam. This has been since 1400 years ago. So it's very clear what we're supposed to drink and eat. It's halal, would be the equivalent, not exactly the same, but equivalent of kosher. And it's very clear the injunction is any intoxicant is not allowed. That's the default. Now, the idea of necessity or medicinal treatment, this can fall under necessary. Now we talk about recreational marijuana, which is a different discussion. Basically, our stance is it's not allowed because it falls under intoxication, and intoxication is not allowed. This God has blessed us with the faculty of thinking, has actually given us leadership over other creatures by virtue of our intellect, and we should preserve that intellect. So under those laws and principles, this is a gift from God, and we shouldn't spoil it. And one way of spoiling it is damaging it through agents such as alcohol, wine, or any intoxicants, whether small amounts or large amounts. So basically, the teachings are very clear, and it's clear-cut in more than one instance in the Holy Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Okay, thank you, Imam. Let's go now, Pandit, back to the Hindu tradition, because you said nature. So now we want to discuss how our communities are going to wrestle with our stand, and I'll ask you, Imam, in a moment about that. But nature, many people are arguing this is a natural drug, and you're saying no, we shouldn't do it in the Hindu faith.
Well, I'm not saying no, we shouldn't do it. I meant that nature, we are to harmonize with nature. Everything is here for the benefit of humanity. If we take sugarcane, for instance, that is grown all across the world, we could go to the marketplace and buy sugarcane, and you bite on it and you can suck the sugar. Sugarcane, when boiled, you get sugar, and when it's fermented, you get alcohol. And we are using it every day. And it's there for a good purpose. But we have to use our own God-given wisdom to see how do we apply this to the betterment of humanity, not to the detriment of humanity.
Okay, let's talk about the community of the Jewish people, because you already have things like whiskey and wisdom and Torah and something else. Torah is going to be Torah and token. Torah and tap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, alcohol is a part of the celebration of life. Without getting intoxicated, without going overboard, there are moments when you celebrate God's gift to us. God provided the trees of the field, the bushes, the wine that provides sanctification of God's name. Now, certainly within reason, but like as you pointed out, maybe there is an opportunity for adults to get together to have some alcohol or some cannabis products and learn some Torah, do some study. I don't think we should have sort of a flat line that says, no, you can't participate in and engage and eat whatever cannabis infused products or smoke them. I mean, I think there is some opportunities. Of course, we don't have any smoking in the synagogue, so that probably wouldn't work.
Okay, so Dr. McQueen, the Catholics, what are you going to do in community life with marijuana?
What are we going to do? I hope we're not going to do anything. I really have a problem with the whole concept. I appreciate the idea of when we're talking about truly adult people, they make their own decisions as long as something is not abused. I would have a problem, I think my faith has a problem, of the idea that you actually take something like marijuana deliberately to get a high, deliberately to have your mind altered. When it happens by accident, if you like, I think that's completely different. The other real problem I see is that although I said children and adults later, we already know that in terms of the effects in the brain, we're really talking about young people up to the age of 25, so they are adult. So I don't think we can just class all adults together and say that it's perfectly okay here, whether it's in celebration of life or otherwise. I think we have to look at the medical evidence. And see
Imam Slimi, we've just got a minute left. What is community life in Islam going to speak and model around marijuana?
Well, there is a debate between young generation, old generation. Those who are born here and born and bred from this culture, they are questioning. Well, as you said earlier, it's natural, it's legal now, but things that are legal, they are not necessarily permissible in terms of ethical procedure. So basically, what we say to the community, we educate. But it won't be difficult for us because we already have this. Alcohol is illicit, is not allowed, so this would be the same ruling. And to add just one quickly, something is very important to follow this discussion later because of the time. But we jumped into legalizing marijuana. Should have been for medicinal treatment, see how it works, maybe have it on the shelves in pharmacies with prescription, then moving to the discussion for recreation. I think we're going very fast here.
Okay, well, I think we all do agree on that. Imam Slimi, thank you for joining us. Pandit, thank you for bringing us the Hindu perspective. Rabbi Wise and Dr. McQueen from our Catholic community. And I'll be back with my own final thoughts from my perspective in a moment. My opinion is don't smoke or ingest to get a buzz. But if I put this through the lens of Jesus's many points of wisdom for our lives, Jesus requested 3 spiritual behaviors from us. Approach life with clarity, avoid folly, be sober-minded. As the Christian Church applies that to marijuana legalization, we will need to be grace-filled and have a wide open welcome to how people interpret that. Bottom line, expect the majority of the Christian Church to caution against using marijuana for recreational use. It's not a life-giving pursuit. So lots more on our website to help you discuss that, including my dinner time advice for talking it over with the kids. And next week at Context, a problem on a much higher plane, finding a home for the Rohingya. Our Molly Thomas is on the ground in Bangladesh reporting from the world's largest refugee camp. That's next week on Context.